If you've been doing bridges, clamshells, squats, and lunges, everything you can think of, and your glutes still aren't firing, it's not because you're weak. It's because something else in your body is literally shutting your glutes off. Today I'm going to break down the 4 hidden reasons your glutes won't activate, and if you don't fix these first, you can't strengthen all day long and still nothing is going to happen. So once you understand these, everything changes. Your glutes will finally fire, your back will feel better, and your workout suddenly become 10 times more effective. So glute activation is something that is so difficult at our office. We see this all the time where people cannot activate their glutes, and we've got to figure out why, because it's not always just a strengthening thing. You'll have people that'll say like, yeah, I went somewhere else and we did all these strengthening exercises, but it still is not working, and that's because they're missing a step before doing the strengthening. So we always say in our office, you've got to look at mobility before stability. And so there's 4 areas that we're going to look at today in order that really will shut off your glutes. And if you don't fix these things, then nothing is ever going to get solved. So the first one is your thoracolumbar junction, the lower part of your thoracic spine. So we have our ribs that come down. So like these are the lower part of the ribs, and it just gets stuck right in through there. It's one of the areas that we have to look at because when you have decreased mobility in this area, you've got to realize in those lower ribs, all of your obliques come in through there and attach right in through here and also attach into the pelvis. So if this doesn't want to move, then all of this is going to protect, and you're not going to be able to move that hip into hip extension to be able to get those glutes to fire properly. And so they'll just shut off. Like you'll just go and like, nope, and it doesn't matter. Like they just can't feel it. So that's one area that we have to look at, because if that's something that is giving us problems, then your glutes won't activate. They will just shut off. It's like, if I do, it's going to hurt. So they just literally shut off. So that's the first area. The second area that we have to look at is our deep core in the front. So like you can have your deep core muscles as well as your psoas muscles. You got to realize the psoas muscle comes into the front and attaches, so it can be tight well up in through here, and it attaches all the way into the front of the spine, and it even goes into your diaphragm. And so all of this, if there's some tightness or protection that's happening in that deep core area or that psoas area, the other side's not going to want to fire, because if you go like this, you're going to be stretching this, and if it's tight, it's going to pull you forward, and you're going to have a hard time getting anything to fire. You're basically fighting the tightness and the stuckness that nothing on the backside is going to fire, much less as you're not even going to be able to get that movement because it's so tight through here. It's getting, you've got to be able to move. The spine's got to be able to move into extension. That hip joint's got to be able to move into extension. And if one of those aren't allowing, you're not going to be able to get those muscles to fire appropriately, or you're going to be going around something. So you're not going to be getting the correct muscles. You'll be getting compensation. You may get some muscles out through here this is why part of this gets so tight through here, because you can't get the hip extensors to actually fire. And so you have to go in. It's another area that we have to look at. And so if there's tightness there, we've got to solve that problem first before we get into hip strengthening. So that's the second reason. The third area that gives us problems is our back. So like if we don't have back mobility, when I go in and I bring that hip into hip extension, you've got to get some back mobility in order to move that. Just like you have to have hip mobility, you can't just have like when I see people that don't have hip mobility, they just move through here. Their hips don't actually move forward. But if you don't have the back to be able to kind of move, then you're not going to be able to get those hips to activate. And a lot of times when you have pain that refers into the hip, it often comes from the back. If you have pain that refers into the hip, the muscles won't activate as well. And so you've got to go and solve, like, is there a back component to this? That's usually the first spot that we always look at first. We start with the back, then we go to the thoracic spine. because we always say we go to the spine first and then we go into that hip to see how it's moving. So if the back isn't moving or you're getting pain referred into the hip from the back, you're also not going to get those glutes to fire. You've got to look at those areas. And so that's the third area. And then the last area I kind of alluded to is if your hip's not moving. If your hip's not moving back, and that could be for several reasons. So if the hip's not able to move backwards, then you're not going to get those muscles to fire at all. It's really, really common. Now the hip cannot move because of something going on in the back. You rule out the back and then you go to the hip and like, oh yeah, the hip's not moving because the hip's not moving. So we've got to look at why it's not moving. Is it something within the joint that we've just got to do some joint stretches and we can unlock it? We see that all the time. There's different things that can kind of get displaced. There's fat pads like in the knee. There's bursas that are in the hip. And if you're doing repeated motions with these joints, sometimes you create this pathway and it will kind of lock up the joint. And how do you unlock it? You use different motions of the hip. So a lot of times, again, hip flexion is what causes a lot of issues, and we don't bring that hip into hip extension, and it locks it up, or hip extension is some sort of rotation. But if you got to unlock that. So that's the first thing, is it the joint? Or as we get older, we tend to get more fibrotic tissue because of abuse and overuse type things in that hip. And so we've got to address that fibrotic tissue as well if that is a component. So these are all different areas that we have to look at. And once we understand your story of kind of what's been going on, where did it start, how is it progressing, we kind of have a good idea of where we need to start with it. But you will never get your glutes to fire if you don't look at all these different reasons. And so this is why we always say you have to look at mobility before you get into stability. And if you don't, you can't just force it that way into strengthening until you get all of these other areas solved first. And it's a big part of what's going on. So you can go in and do all the strengthening you want, squeezing the glutes, and they just can't get it activated because of one of these 4 areas that need to be looked at. So if you're doing all the glute exercises and nothing is changing, it's time to look beyond strengthening. If you want help figuring out which of these 4 issues are stopping your glutes from firing, we offer a free discovery visit where you can look at your mobility, test your strength, and find out the real source of the problem. Drop a comment with the word glutes or click on the link below to schedule your discovery visit. Don't keep guessing. Your body will tell you exactly what's wrong when you know where to look. And stay tuned because our next video will explain what you can do to solve these 4 problem areas, and we'll get into more details on what that looks like in our next video.